Okay, welcome everyone. Good evening. I hope we're all doing amazing. Um, Welcome back. Happy New Year. Right, this is 8 p.m. and we are looking to kickstart immediately. Once again, my name is Daniel Mabadije, and I'm happy to be here. This is our very first session for 2025, and we are looking to begin a series called the Docker series for this year. So it's very, very important for us to understand what Docker is all about, apart from just talking about things that we do when it comes to writing PHP as well. We also saw that Docker is really an important tool that we feel that most developers should be able to use, especially when it comes to setting up Laravel applications and you have situations where you need to, do things like version changing and all of that. Let's say you have PHP 8 installed and, you're working with some legacy code base that may require a lesser version of PHP. How do you manage that? How do you handle that? And this is where Docker comes in as a very resourceful tool. Once again, welcome to everyone. We will not do a lot of introductions, but I'll just basically introduce what PHP Talks is once again. And I hope we learn a thing or two from this. So PHP Talks basically is a community that helps people to learn PHP. Basically, that's what we do, right? So we basically talk about things that are not normally discussed. So let's say, for instance, what do you need to get a job, right? Is way beyond your CRUD operations, your create, read, delete, and all of that, right? There are a lot of other factors that makes you a better developer, and those are the things that we discuss. We've had previous sessions over the last 2 years, right? And we've discussed numerous topics and numerous sessions on different topics entirely. We do have a YouTube channel where we get to discuss about where we have some of our recorded sessions there. Some of the sessions are not recorded based on request from the speakers, maybe due to we shared something that is not supposed to be shared. But we do believe that every session really helps a developer to become a better person. So please do well to check that out. And once again, welcome for welcome to this session. And I really do hope you have a great time. For this session, we are going to be having Elisha Opong, walk us through what Docker is, what's all about. It's going to carry us basically in this series to know how to use Docker. And we believe by the end of this session, you know what Docker is. You are going to know how to use Docker and know how to use Docker effectively. Once again, thank you. And over to Elisha Opong.
Over to me. Please let me know if I'm legible. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, super amazing. Happy New Year to everybody. And like Daniel said, we'll be talking about Docker and why Docker. So a bit of disclaimer. I'm still learning Docker. I'm still learning the Docker technology. But I think I know enough that I can share with everybody since we never know everything. So basically, I would start with what Docker is. What is Docker? At some point, I'm going to share my screen when we start writing code itself. What is Docker? I think I should just read it from their page directly. Do they have anything that speaks to what Docker is? No. I know what Docker is, but I want to get what is Docker. What did you miss? Which one is that? Oh, okay, you missed the classes. Yeah, me too. So after we had PHP Connect, everybody just ran away to sort out their lives. Okay, so Docker is a software platform that allows developers to test, to create, test, and deploy applications quickly. Docker helps us to create, test, and deploy applications quickly. So, from my own understanding, Docker is a computer inside your computer. It's a way for you to provision services and use them in your computer. So we have your laptop itself, which is mostly referred to as bare metal. So most people like installing their softwares directly to their computers. Like you want to use Nginx, you just your terminal sudo apt install Nginx blah blah blah. It pulls Nginx into your laptop. You pull in PHP into your laptop. You pull in, let's say, MySQL into your laptop. Just pull in all these services into your laptop, and you have your setup. That means you've been able to create a setup. This setup is the truth for you. It's what you use across all your projects. And if you installed, say, for example, MySQL 5.7, that means you'll be using 5.7 across board. The port that MySQL uses, I can't remember what it is. I shouldn't even have it in my head, remains the same, and you're kind of using it for just 5.7. If you want to set up MySQL 8.0 at a later time, it will take a considerably huge amount of work for you to install it and then probably provision it on a separate port, right? And it becomes challenging. The next thing would be, no, I'm not sharing my screen yet. I'll share my screen with time. Then we'll now go to, probably you have Nginx, which I think Nginx is pretty straightforward, it's just one. Then you now have PHP, you're using PHP 3.5, 3.0. No, I think 3 is too far back. So let's say PHP 5.7. Yes, I think there's a 5.7. No, that's MySQL. You just say PHP 5. You're using PHP 5 on one very legacy project you're running. And at a point, you got a new gig that requires you to use 7.4. So this would mean provisioning 7.4. And the problem is our laptop, our bare metal can probably only have one version of PHP running at a time. So you see most people go to override PHP, that, just so they can, when they're switching to, let's say, Project Daniel, you'd have to go to your terminal and type plenty things to switch to PHP 7.4 so you can run Daniel's project. And then you have to go back to Roger's project. So you now have to now start typing another terminal commands to move to PHP 8.0. And sometimes it can be very frustrating because it doesn't work, and you now have to start replacing things in your import file, right? In your, what do they call this file? ZH something terminal file. Right? All this stress is what Docker kind of comes to fix. We have other technologies that are doing almost the same thing. We also have some desktop application recently, like a Laravel Head. I think Laravel Head, yes, that helps you switch applications. We also have this technology, what is it called? Laravel something else that you can pack. Laravel Valley. Yes, so Laravel Valley is another thing. I think it builds on Docker still, but it's a wrapper that helps, makes it really nice. So you could just specify based on the project folder which PHP version it's going to use. But going beyond all of those abstractions that has been done, and then going deep into what actually powers all this abstraction, Docker helps you take control of your application requirements, the services and infrastructure that it needs to run. Docker helps you control it. So think about it like you have a room, you have an empty room, and inside this room you have the ability to build houses, separate houses, still inside one room. So I just have maybe a 6 by 6 bedroom, and inside this 6 by 6 bedroom, I can build a 3-story building in one small part. I can build a multi-million naira warehouse in another part. I can build a bungalow in another part. I can also build an estate in another part. So you consider your laptop to be this 6 by 6 hypothetical. Okay, it happens. So we have your laptop to be this exactly. Excuse. Okay. So we have this to be hypothetical, your laptop to be a hypothetical 6 by 6 room, and then Docker helps you build different infrastructures across it. So you could have your setup. So you could have setup for Node.js running on your Docker. You could have setup for PHP running on your Docker. You could have setup for Python. You have setup for Rust, and all these things runs without affecting your bare metal. Remember, I said bare metal could be another word for your laptop itself. So you're not installing anything on your laptop itself. You're just installing things on the Docker platform. It's like a layer on which you put all these things on. You can pull down, you can bring up, and all of those. I'm going to share my screen now and bring up the Docker interface for all of us to see. Docker is pretty straightforward to set up, so I'll skip the setup parts and hope we can just do that at a later point. I want us to probably get our hands dirty a bit with Docker itself. So yeah, this is. Let me know if you can see my screen, Daniel. Maybe just say something.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, this is Docker Desktop. Windows have it, Linux have it, and Mac have it. Docker Desktop. It helps you manage your containers, images, and volumes, everything from its terminal. You could also do the same thing from your terminal, but it's just pretty easy from here. Here for me is just mostly where I can see what is running, what do I need to stop. I also use the terminal too. So this is for this dev infrastructure you're seeing here. This is what powers all the services I use on a day-to-day to work. It's like it's running. So I used it today. So just going through, we have Nginx set up on Docker. I have go back. I have Nginx set up on Docker. I have PHP 8.2. I have PHP 8.3. I have PHP 8.1. I have PHP 7.2. Then I have this service I call it PHP. This is 7.4. Then I have MySQL 5. I have PHP 8. This is MySQL 8 for me. This is Minio. I don't know if you guys know Minio. It mimics the AWS S3 bucket. So if you're working locally and you know you might need to integrate S3 when you get to production, instead of having to pull out, use your S3, right? Because that will be sending network requests. You could just spin up Minio and it works locally. So when you now go to production, you put in your AWS keys and stuff like that. So I have TypeSense here. TypeSense is a search, it's like Elasticsearch, I think so. Yeah, an alternative Elasticsearch. So it helps you with searching long strings, etc., etc. Then I have Redis here, I have Postgres, and I have Redis Insight. Redis Insight is like an analytics tool for Redis. So these are the things I use on a daily. So I just spin all of this up and I'm ready to go. None of this is installed on my current laptop. So this is what Docker helps you to do. I have these various things running and my laptop does not spin so hard. It's just normal, not running up and up. So yeah, that's what I use. So we have a few terminologies. I'll stop sharing my screen now and then we just talk. So we have a few terminologies that we use in Docker. First off, we have some, I'll say we have images. Just take note of them and then I'll explain them one after the other. We have images, we have containers, and we have volumes. There are a lot more things that we have on Docker, but remember this is an introductory class. So we have containers, images, and volumes. So what now happens is when you're looking at container, yes, I would have said thank you, Holy Spirit, Dallas, because he brought that to me. We know what classes are, and we know what objects are. So I'm going to explain this in the concept of classes and objects. So consider an image to be a class. Containers are made from images. So for example, I have a person class, and then I instantiate that person and call the person Daniel. An image is the class. A Docker image is example of a class. So I could have a PHP 8 image. I think I'll just show us an already made Docker file. So it will make this very easy for me to explain. And then I'll come back and then we build our own bit by bit. So for example, this thing I have here, this Nginx here, the image itself is called Nginx. And then I now have a container made out of it. Open up now. Hold on, follow me. Are you not opening up? When I didn't want you to open it. Yes. So like you see here, this is running Nginx. Then it has a few things that kind of differentiate it. I can have this Nginx instantiated in almost 7 places, 10 places, 15 places, right? So what now differentiates them are mostly two things, but one primarily is the PID. This is it, the process ID. I think that's what they call it.
So I
The
think you're not
process ID.
sharing your screen.
What? Oh my God. Sorry. Sorry. I thought I was sharing my screen. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, sir. We can see your screen. Sorry, sir.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. So I was saying images, containers, then I was talking about this Nginx. This is a container. This is an instance of the Nginx image, because I believe we understand classes and objects. So this is the name of the container. This is not the name of the image right now. This is the name of the container, and this is the process ID, the PID. It's unique to every instance. Let me bring up this. I'm on my code screen now. Let me know if you can see it and if it's legible.
Yes, sir. We can see it.
Okay, so this thing you saw here, all the things you saw running here has been defined right here. So I'm using version 3 of Docker Compose. They have various versions. This is Nginx service. This is PHP
Sir, please
8.3.
can you zoom into it a bit? It's not legible. Please, can you zoom in a
Yes,
bit?
okay, let
Yes,
me
sir.
do that.
Yes, sir.
Let me do that. Is it better now?
Yes, it is better. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so
Can
we
you move
have,
it?
I'm using version 3 of Docker. There is services. We now define services. We'll get into all of this when we are building our own. This is our own version. We'll build it again, but this is what I use. I just want to explain something. So each service, or you could call it, maybe you could alias it to also be container. They don't use that one. Also call it container definitions, but the right word is like services. So you define your services here. So each service has a service name, and you give the container a name. This container name is like the variable name. When you're instantiating the person class, you give it the variable name, probably Daniel or Nelson or Etoro, right? That is the container name. For most of it, it is expected to be unique, but the most unique thing that you can use is the process ID. Process ID. Now, this is an image. Remember, I said image is like the class that you define. And I made all of these things when I was working at a company called Square One. So that's why I called it like Square One Engine X. Now, I'll explain why I have my image as a custom name and not as a global name that you probably would have expected, which would have been something like this, Nginx. Now I'll get to it. Let's just flow as it comes. So when you're now defining the services, the other things you could define to like build, ports, depends on volumes and extra host. I'll get to that. So you just define all these things like this: 8.3, 8.2, 8.1. And why what brought me here was that I can use one image and define 7 or more services. I can use one image and define 7 or more services. I'll stop sharing my screen now, open another project folder, and then we discuss about it. This is the introduction. That's why I'm hopping on to up and around just to be sure we have good knowledge. Then we'll move in from there. I'm trying to bring up a load balancing project ID with engine with a Docker. Help proxy. Hold on. Proxy 7. Okay, sharing my screen back now. Favor, yes, please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So I noticed that in your Docker Compose file, you had a lot of PHP um, images, a lot of PHP container services. So I just wanted to ask, is it like for the purpose of like explaining how they work, or
No, no.
there's a reason why you have, you know, because you have
Okay.
different versions.
Yes, I do. I'll explain. I'll just get back to your question after I share this. Okay, what I wanted to show here was engine X. So this is a bit technical. What I was trying to do here was load balancing. But if we go to services and look at this Docker file, you would see one thing. Hold on. Look at number one. You would see from PHP 8.2 FPM. That's for PHP server 3. You go to server 1. It's still from 8.2 FPM. You go to 1. It's still, so everything is pulling out from one image. What I wanted to show here was you can have you can have multi containers from one image. So the same way you can have one class and multiple instantiations of that class, you can have one image and multiple containers from that image. That's what I was trying to explain from images. So Favor, for what you're asking, no, I'm not having them because I want to explain on this call. This is my day-to-day work setup. So I have all these things, PHP 8.3, 8.2, 8.1, 8, 7.4, 7.2, because there are various projects that use them. And I keep them because I have them there. Now, the way I set up my workflow is I have 8.3 example, and I come to volumes. All the projects I have that use 8.3 are listed here. I think just this one for now. I cleaned up recently. Then the ones that use 8.2 are here a lot more. The ones that use 8.1 are here. One that use 8, So like I have projects that use each of the services. Then how I now differentiate them is in my Nginx. Nginx now have access to all my projects. We'll get to volumes and that will make sense. Then when I now go to Nginx setup, where we're here, I hope I'm not overclocking you guys. Then I have my sites, like you should know virtual server blocks and all. So I now decide what is being used when I get to pass CGI pass 8.3. If I go to Erudite is using 8.2. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, okay. So like this is like a general Docker compose file for all your
This is
projects, not that you are
yes,
spinning. Okay,
this is my day-to-day Docker setup. All right, so
thank you.
we now come back here. We've explained images and containers. I'm hoping we understand what that is. Yes. So we now go to volumes. Images and containers, like the example of class that we have. When we're working with classes, we actually have encapsulation. We have data protection. So if you define a variable as private, no other thing outside can access it except the class itself. Now, the thing with Docker images and containers are they are always standalone. When you instantiate when you run from a container, that container knows itself only. It does not know any other container around it at all, unless you tell the next container about it. So what now happens here is you would see here, you know what, let me bring just Nginx over to the other side so it will not be so overwhelming. And then we build it up from here. Good. Remove all of this. Sorry, just follow me. Remove all of this. Remove depends on when needed. Keep ports, keep context. Error? No. Remove context and then keep this Nginx. All right, so here we have a very simple Docker
Please, sir,
setup.
can you increase the font, please?
Is it better?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so here, this right here, this image here is our class name. This container name here is our instantiation, the variable we're giving it. Then what this it means is, like I said earlier, when you spin up a container, it's not aware of any other container around it. So you now have to open up a port for it to use to gain access into that instance. Consider each service to be a very lightweight, for most times, a lightweight Linux instance, right? We are all familiar with Linux. Anytime you spin up an engine, a Docker composer, you're spinning up an example of a Linux instance, a Linux server. But in this case, that Linux server only has Nginx installed on it. And we know when we're installing Nginx on our local computer, we can have non-SSL ports 80 where we can access whatever is in our Nginx folder. And then we also have 433, which we use to access the TSL instance, which is the encrypted side, right? So how do we now make Docker, which is a separate container, a separate Linux instance, aware of the files that we have, the files that we want to run on it? Because when you instantiate, when you run this, all you're going to get is a Linux instance with Nginx. I think we should actually run it. PHP talks Nginx, but to run this, I'll have to stop this. Please, if there are a lot of things you don't understand, no problem. This is just the introductory course, so I'm running around so you kind of get the feel of everything, and then we dig in. Kindly follow me. All right, I've stopped all that was running here. So let's see if we can pull this up and see. I can't increase my Nginx, my terminal, this thing, but what's happening here is that it's trying to pull
That's fine, sir.
Nginx from Docker Hub. Yes. Yeah. So one other thing we can talk about right now while we are at it is Docker. Right. So Docker Hub is like where it's like we know packages, and we also know packages for PHP. Which one is for NPM? NPM is for JavaScript fellows. Packages is for PHP. Like you use Composer and you pull down a package from packages. You use NPM and you pull down a package from, I don't know where to put it, forgotten the name. So that's the same thing that we have in Docker. We have a hub where there are some images already made that people push in. So you don't have to do it again. So like here we have Nginx. Is my voice breaking? Nelson, is my voice breaking?
No, sir. No, sir. Your
No,
voice
it's
is not speaking.
fine.
The person just needs to change the connectivity.
Okay, okay. So we now have this hub that if you create an image, you can build it and send it here into the hub, and it will be accessible by everybody. Just like people create packages and push it to packages, and I can pull it down. Let me even confirm that it's packages. Yes, the hub is a repository. Exactly. It's a globally accessible repository. But just like we have GitHub, you can have your public repos and private repos. A lot of companies build their custom images and push it into Docker Hub, but make it private, that is only accessible by those that have certain either keys or I think VPN, or just they're added to the private hub. So yeah, exactly. Now, I was about to talk about volumes, but I wanted this to pull. Bad network, taking a while. All right. So what is happening now is that it's pulling it down from in a Docker Hub. Now the pool is complete. If we go to here, if we go to our desktop, you can see we have PHP talks Nginx, which is what we call our container name. I don't know if that makes sense, but the image itself is Nginx. Now we could define another one here and call it Nginx2. Nginx2, still the same image, remember, and still the same port. If we have issues, we'd have issues with conflicting ports, but I think I can do something like this. And let's see, we're just playing around now to push down the idea that images have containers, and containers can be spawned as many times from one particular image. Or for three. Okay. For 3, 18, 3. I keep messing it up all the time. Okay, so now coming here, you see that we have PHP Talks Nginx, PHP Talks Nginx 2. So we can, and we are still using the same image that we pulled the first time, and we can see it did not pull the image afresh. So we can have one image and different instances of it, as many as possible. And it reflects the object-oriented principle that we have about having one class and having many objects from the class. So now that we have this, I'm going to, okay, let me just leave it here. And I said that Nginx, the instance like this reflects or mirrors a Linux instance. Now, if we click in, we've opened Nginx now, and we can see this is very small. You can see, let me see. No, I cannot increase it, no problem. So you can now move into the terminal for it. This is the terminal. I can also increase it. Sorry. So if you now do ls, you're going to see everything that you can see on an average Linux instance. I'll just go out of that since we can see it properly. Yep. So that drives back the fact that we can have images, one image and various containers. And as you can see, it has a different PID. For each one of them, there is a different PID for it. Okay, let's go back and talk about volumes. Now, how do we tell our container, this is the file that I want to run inside of you? There is something we call volume binding. Volume binding is where you define a particular set of files and tell the container you have access to these files. If you don't add those volumes to the container, it is not going to have access to it at all. It is not going to have access. So you will now say, why can't I run Project Daniel on this instance? It's just because Project Daniel is not aware that there is any what do I call it, volume like that. I don't know about that folder or yada yada yada. So now, how do we now, I'll just stop all of this. How do we now introduce the volume to Docker? We have a keyword here called volumes. Now, with volumes, you can then make your Nginx container aware of the various folders that you want it to have. I wish I could increase my terminal's font. I can't. So I'll just pick one from here and bring back to put here. Okay. Now we utilize the relative path method when we are working with volume. So you have to, the dot dots, and the folder name, like how you move around in the file system. So for example, now that we have dot filament, if I run this up, if this folder does not exist, it's going to create it just so it can satisfy this. And you can see for those of us that have run Nginx installation before, you are aware of the var www folder, and there's always also the HTML folder too, where you put in all the projects that you need. So the left hand side here points to the folder on your bare metal being your laptop, and the right hand side points to the mapping. Where should these files appear in the container? And mind you, if you make any changes to this file system in the container, it's going to reflect back on your bare metal. It's like creating a symlink. For those of us that know what a symlink is, it's like creating a symlink. And then when you do this, there is also another thing you can add here as for permission system. You could have RO, I think RO, yes, which is read only. You can have RWX, which is read, write, execute. So these permissions that you see on your normal terminal are also available. So for example, you have a php.ini file that you would want maybe your Nginx to use, but you don't want it to be edited, you add these permissions to it at the end and it will just walk it through. But if you don't have that permissions added, it takes full control, read, write, execute. So this is how you introduce volumes to your container when you're using Docker Compose. If you're using your terminal, you introduce it using -v, using -v. All right, so we go back to our Docker and then we move forward to it. I've spoken about containers, I've spoken about images, I've spoken about volumes. These things are always very, very large. I think they're always very large. For example, my main database that I use here, it's already 7.3 gig, and there are all other things here that are so large. With time, you can just come in here and then prune. But with pruning means you might lose some things. So just know what you're pruning. Okay, let's now move into something else. I've explained Docker container, I've explained Docker hub, I've explained Docker image. Let's move into Docker Compose. Did somebody send a message? Okay, yes, please, please, please. Yes, Favor. At any point you want to say anything, you could just interrupt me and say it.
Okay,
Favor.
so my question is for volumes. So when you let's say you end the container, like you kill the container, does the volume still get retained, or what happens in such a case? So
Okay, so when you kill your container, nothing happens to the file because it's already stored on your laptop. The changes you made inside the container to those files, if they were saved, they will also be saved to your laptop. If you exit the container, that's fine. When you come back again, you'd have access to those files again. But then if you make any change to, maybe let's say something like the infrastructure in that container, for example, you provisioned an Nginx container, and while you were in there, you installed maybe zip into that Nginx instance. When you exit the container, that installation is lost. When you come back again, you would have to install zip again. But there's a way to go about to fix that. Maybe we just talk about that a bit. So to answer your question directly, so far you have volume set up and you close your container and open up at a later time, you will still have access to all the files and changes that you made before you closed it. Does that make sense?
yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we've looked into, yeah. Let's talk about Docker Compose briefly. This thing we did here, creating a YML file, is Docker Compose. This YML file we did, sharing my screen
Sorry, we
again.
can't see your screen.
Yeah, you're going to see it right now. It's coming up right now again. Okay. So this file saw us do here, Docker Compose.yml, is Docker Compose is an engine that runs. Is it an engine? Is it an engine? Well, I think we could call it an engine. It's an
Yes, sir,
abstraction
it is. It
that
is.
runs, okay, yes, that runs Docker. So when you provision all these services like this under the hood, it's going to do all the Docker Compose pull image, Docker Compose run, Docker Compose PS, Docker Compose inspect, etc., etc., etc. Then you could also have Docker Compose kill. I think so. And when you're killing, you pass it either the container name or the PID. We spoke about the PID and the container name earlier, that it's like the identification for each specific container, considering we can spin up as many as possible using one image. For an introduction to Docker, I think you guys know a whole lot. So you know that Docker helps you provision various infrastructures all at the same time, running all on their own without conflicting. It does not interfere with the things you have installed on your laptop already. You can switch between services very easily without typing a whole lot of things. Like you guys saw on my already existing setup, I have 8.3, 8.2, 8.1, and all other various things. and I decide how and when to use them in my Nginx files. Where are you, Nginx site? Yeah. So when I'm now utilizing it, I can decide to use 8.3. For example, in this particular project case management, I'm using 8.3 to power it. And then in Erudite, tests, technical test I did for a job recently, I'm using 8.2. So this is just all I need to do, provision my Nginx, pick the service I want, and that's it. It doesn't get easier than that. I'm not opening, and I did this thing once. So when I hit, I don't know if, okay, I turn this down. When I hit, for example, case management URL, it automatically just uses 8.3 for me. When I hit Erudite, it uses 8.2. When I hit service me, it uses 8.2. There's this one that I use for relative. Yeah, this is 7.4. So when I now come here, it just uses what I need without me having to do so much setup while at it. That's what Docker really, really helps us with. And lastly, it helps us avoid it works on my computer. That issue where you're saying it works on my computer, it doesn't work on my computer, blah, blah, blah. So when we have all these Docker images set up, I send you the Docker compose file, and you can just install it with one command, composer build. When we have all these services listed out here, all you just need to run is composer docker compose build, and it's going to run and provision all these services for you. So it eases up on infrastructure development or setup timeline. This, but then one gotcha I would love you to know, in case you want to go and start playing around with Docker, is when you're pulling an image, avoid using the latest command. When you're pulling an image, avoid using this command. Avoid using this command. The problem with this command is, or this keyword, is that it has inconsistencies issue. I think this thing once made me debug my setup for almost a full day. Like, I didn't know what was wrong from the last time when I installed it. I went to my volumes, images, and pruned a whole lot of things. When I started that project again, it kept having issues. And the problem was, when I set up Nginx as or whatever the service was as at a previous time, the latest was 17.0.1, for example. And then I'm provisioning and running on 17.0.1. When I got to a later time, the latest turned to 19. I think it was Node.js, but I can't really recall. It now turned to 19. So everything I was building on built on the expectation of 17.0.1, but that changed to 19. So when you use the
Absolutely.
keyword latest, you lose control on the exact one that is being installed. So that's just
Absolutely, sir.
little experience I got. So something to look out for. What else should I talk about now? Yes, let's look into how this image is now actually made, and we now pull it in. Who makes it? How do they make it? From where? And then I think we can wrap up with that on a subsequent class. I think we should actually take up a project. So you do it, I do it, and we kind of enjoy it. Maybe we can do load balancing with Nginx using Docker. I have a few GitHub repositories I played around with Docker, so maybe I'll just share it later on. We'll choose one project and run that project on Docker just to see, and we get a feel of real-time issue, not just me overloading with information. All right, which one should we go for? Let me see. PHP Docker file. Nice. Let's use this one. So remember I said that Docker images are low-key Linux instances. Low-key Linux instances. So it's just you taking a Linux instance and putting it on, I think they call it a hypervisor layer. Should be a hypervisor layer.
Yes,
So
yes.
okay, I still know these small things. So remember we had the house that I explained, the 6x6 room that gives you a lot of room to build as many things as possible as you want. Sorry, I'm not using a book to teach this. I'm teaching this from experience, so I move around a bit, but it all comes together. So we have this 6x6 room that we have, and in each corner you can build story buildings, skyscraper, you can provision a bungalow, you can provision an estate even, and all of this stuff. What Docker does is inside this your room, it gives you a layer where you can play around with different things all around without them affecting each other. And each thing that you build has the basis of a Linux distro, a Linux distro. Now, from here, I am saying from PHP 8.0 FPM. Do we know what FPM means? Do we know what FPM means? Anybody?
Fast CGI process management or something.
Manager. Good. Fast CGI process manager. What helps Nginx translate or save your PHP files. FPM, Fast CGI Process Manager. So you see, you could use even after you install PHP, you still have to install the FPM, so you can use it inside your Nginx server block. All right. So if we now go into, for example, PHP FPM, and we go to Docker Hub and check, you will still see at the end when you go, you see that it's from Linux Alpine image. So this is an image already that we have 8.0 FPM. And now command. Remember, I said it's a Linux instance, so I can run all these Linux command on them. I can run all these Linux command on them. Hold on, someone is asking a question with respect to the class. Right. So Favor did mention something about, I'm still sharing my screen, correct? Okay. So
Yes, you
Favor did,
are.
okay, Favor mentioned something about what happens when you close your container and you start it up again. So I already explained from a volume level that so far you map your volumes. Any changes you make inside the container to that volume would be persisted on your laptop. But what happens to services or changes in infrastructure that we make to the container? If you log into that container, if you SSH in terminal into that container and make those changes directly, when you close down that container, all those changes are lost. But if you want those changes to persist, that's where you now have something called a Docker file. Now, a Docker file is where you provide instructions for Docker to use when setting up your image. Now, when we have this Docker file like this, it's going to create another image for us, and we can give it a name. Let's go to Docker Compose, PHP 8. And we can give it a name, like you can see here, follow me, PHP 8 build context, Docker PHP 8. All right. And then we have our Docker file that we're using. So what I'm saying is when you're done running this Docker file, make a new class and call that class one PHP 8. So using this image now, based on the earlier explanation, I can instantiate plenty. Daniel, check, someone is trying to come into the class. You can instantiate many more containers from this. If you don't give it a name, I'm sure Docker is going to find a name and give it for you, because it's using Docker file and you're making some changes. Amazing. So I now say, okay, the work directory is going to be var www. I'm pointing it to the work directory for Nginx, the one that Nginx uses. So whenever you log in to this terminal, this is the route, the folder that it will take you to. So any file it is looking for, it will use this as the base. This is like the home directory. That's why we said working directory. So now I want to start customizing the things that will be available for PHP 8, because when we say from PHP 8, it's just going to have PHP 8.0 FPM alone. It doesn't have any extra thing unless you add it. So now say update -f. This means force for those that know Linux. Install -yes -y. What this means is if there is any prompt, just choose yes and keep going. So install build essential library for PNG, JPEG, etc., zip, unzip, OpenSSH, blah blah blah. Then I now move into installing PHP extensions that I would use I mean, it's for running Laravel. So I need to have things like MySQL driver so it can communicate with the MySQL container, etc., etc., etc. Set the memory limit, and any other thing that you do on an Nginx and on a Linux instance, you can do it on your Docker image. You can do it. See all these things and all and all and all. You could do them. What it now means is after you build this, all these things could be set. So you don't have to do them again. They will keep being there in the image or whenever you spin up a container. So this is how to persist infrastructure changes on an image. Now, if you want to change anything, maybe at a later point, I want to add, for example, I didn't add a particular, maybe Python. I want to now have Python on my PHP 8.0 FPM. All I just need to do here is add py. Let me Python now. Let me just use ping. I don't know what that is. So, and I will now have to rebuild this image, because if I don't rebuild, this will not be available again, because it wasn't there when we made the first class. So I'll have to rebuild it and to install this thing for me. So when you want to make infrastructural changes on it, because the thing is, you would not have a one size fits all Docker image. You bring the image down and make some changes to it. So this is how you make those changes. I don't know if I've made any kind of sense in the past 51 minutes for you guys listening. Okay, so I'll go back to just recap.
Yes.
On an introductory level, we have images, which is the core basis for Docker. We have containers, we have volumes, we have ports, we have depends on. Okay, yes, one other thing we have is called data. Hold on, let me confirm the name. Volume. Okay, so yes, still volume. Now the difference with this other volume here that we have at the end here is for when you want to do things like database. So you can like store database, you can map. Let me open my database instance here. Yep. So we can see here we have this one already explained it. So we now have the MySQL data where it holds everything concerning your data that you see, the tables, the column, every. So you provision a volume for it like this. Now, what this does, the difference between provisioning the volume like this and like this is that for this one, you can actually have it as a file easily accessible on your folder. Something can be deleted too. When you provision it like this, I think Docker has a volumes folder deep inside Docker folder, so you can't easily access them, but you can still access them regardless. We have 7 minutes to go. So I hope I have been able to throw your brains here and about around Docker, just enough to raise your curiosity to go and start looking into what exactly is Docker. So what I would expect from us for the next class when we fix this, have Docker installed on your laptop, play around it a bit, and then the next class would have real hands-on classes where you actually open your laptop. I'll open my laptop. I'll provide you with the services, or you build out the services with me while we're building it, because most of these things, it's easy when you're doing it with me, or it's easy when you're doing it with the course, the tutorial kind of builds muscle memories. There are a lot of things I can't recall, but if I start typing when I need them, I'll just get them back. So the next class we're going to go hands-on, and I think would build what should we build? I was thinking of load balancing. I don't know. Maybe we can discuss that in the group. What should we build on Docker, and then we play around it. We could even build microservices, an API gateway. Okay, we can plan on an API gateway. We could do microservices, whatever. We'll choose one so that we can make this course a bit more relatable, where you can probably take it out and implement it on your day-to-day project. But for today, I hope I've been able to pass you around the core parts. Not everything, oh, I don't even know everything in my head, not everything. but the core parts of Docker, what it is, what it does, why we use it. We use it to make development setup time very fast and also to have consistency across all environment. It most likely really flies when you have an elastic setup. What I mean by most people that are really into infrastructure scaling, the development operations, DevOps side of things is maybe you're having a whole lot of traffic and you're scaling, I think vertically or horizontally. Nothing confuses me to tomorrow. You're adding more servers and you're using things like Kubernetes and I think Terraform, where
Yes.
you write out what it uses to spin up a new server for you quickly. Having Docker Compose setup helps you so fast that when you're instantiating a new server, you are sure that it
Absolutely.
uses the same infrastructure across board,
Absolutely.
nothing varies, right? This helps you reduce your setup time by a mile, by a long mile. So for lack of time, thank you so much. If you have any question, you just put it inside the group and we can look at it together. The recording will be shared. Just put your questions in the group and I'll answer. Let's prepare those that couldn't make it today. They won't understand what we're talking about. We'll just be doing our thing and going. So thank you very much. The next class should be in a week or two. Daniel will
Thank you,
decide,
sir.
and then I'll let you know whatever I would need as a basis to build the project we are going to build. So I do hope you
But-
enjoyed the class.
but- Sorry, just one quick one.
Okay,
Yeah, and boss. Yeah, good evening. All right, it's Dixon. Okay, I
good
wanted
evening,
to
sir.
ask, but yeah, thanks for everything. But is there any like notable downside to Docker? Is there any like we've spoken about the advantages and stuff? Is there any downside to it?
If
Through
your
your years
laptop
of
does not
experience.
have strength, if your laptop does not
Okay.
have strength to pull down, it slow down your laptop. Another thing is it can easily grow in size. It can easily grow in size when you start pulling these containers together, you start changing things, it grow in size. But there is also a trick to keeping your images slim. Like you can finish customizing an image and you're looking at 7 gig in
Yeah.
image alone. And imagine you now have, there was where I worked at Lumiform, we had like, I think 7 images to pull down, and one was almost at like 6 GB, just one. So imagine pulling 7 to run a setup, it's high.
Wow.
But then there's something we call multi-stage Docker setup. I think that's the name, but multi-stage is what you should know. I don't know the remaining,
Mm.
but there's something called multi-stage Docker provisioning. What it does is it provisions all these containers and then extracts it out so that you have a very slim version of everything. I can't really explain it well, but just know that there's something called multi-stage Docker provision. You can take it up. Yeah, so it
All right.
helps you slim down
Yeah.
your containers. When you use command like CMD and entry point, would get to that point. CMD and entry point, it's used when you are customizing your Docker image. It's like when I start the Docker, what should run by default? It's mostly used when you're provisioning for Node.js. So when you now say, okay, this is my entry point, so as soon as you up the container, it runs that command without you having to run it by yourself. Entry point. You could use a script, you could use a shell script, and it runs a series of, there's so much you can do. So much. This call
All
is
right.
going to end on us. So this call
Thank
is
you
going
very
to
much.
end on us. It's the last 2
So
minutes ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so
Thank you.
much,
Daniel, before you
Elisha
call me,
Okbo.
Daniel, before you call me,
Okay, I
Daniel,
think
before you
someone
call
is still
me,
asking a
Daniel, before
question.
you call me, Daniel, before you call me. The thing with Docker is,
Okay,
and as with every other technology, you
okay,
know more as you learn more. So what I'm
yes, sir.
doing here is just to expose you to the technology. I am not going to cover everything. Please forgive me. But
Yes, sir.
with every information I give you at a time, it's enough for you to build on, and it makes it easy for you to understand things. And if you have any question at any point, just hit me in the group, not DMO in the
Sir.
group. Thank you.
Daniel, sorry, before you take over, please. To your last point, I have just pasted a multi-stage script on the call. You can just take a look at it. I thought that question
Please
was
first in the
very
group, first in the group, because this call ends soon. Just first in the group, so
okay.
everybody has
All
it there.
right.
Daniel, please take over. You're running seconds now.
all right. Yeah, thank you so much, Elisha. Thank you so much for joining our very first session this year. We are really excited to have you, and thank you so much, Elisha, for sharing valuable insights. So to be very honest, Docker is really necessary. I feel like for any developer that is looking to actually upskill, Docker is really, really necessary for you, because you are going to be in situations where you are going to be working with code bases that are actually like, very large infrastructures, microservices and all of that. So, and those most of these applications, depends on Docker, to function. And there are still some softwares that you're going to work with that are legacy code bases, right? And imagine having to now start, switching PHP versions and all of that, having different configurations, just because you want to run a particular project. Meanwhile, you could use Docker, for that. So I feel like for every developer that's looking to upskill, right, you actually need Docker. This is not just for DevOps people alone, because we like saying Docker is for DevOps, right? Even as a software developer, there are situations where you come across where you actually need Docker, even when you want to set up a project locally for your company and all of that. So thank you so much, Alicia, for sharing this insight with us. This is actually a series, so this is not where we are going to put the a full stop. We're going to have another session, by next month, right, to continue on this series, and we'll just see where this takes us to. And after this series, we're still going to have much, more series, still on Docker and outside Docker. Remember, PHP Talks, we discuss things that, are related to PHP and basically will help you become a better programmer. Once again, thank you so much for joining tonight's session. I really do appreciate. And, see you on Monday. Bye.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Bye.